Hi,
How's it going?
it's going well, thank you. It's really just an opportunity to hear about the work from you, which is very special. We don't even get to do this when we're open, so this is
Right.
maybe I can kick it off by saying that here at Nitja, we've been working on the opening exhibition called Above Us on the Sky. We were supposed to open in January and now we're on 9th of March and we're still closed due to the pandemic. And your work is part of this group show, which aims to address how individuals can operate and how they can be of strength within a society. And your work is actually the first one that one gets to see when entering the show. And it's a video work called Artist Interview, and it's part of a bigger series called Expanding Brain. I was thinking just to get to hear a little bit how that series came to exist and when the work was made. What was your thoughts behind it?
I'm an artist that's been working in performance and video and installation, sculptural installations for I would say in this specific iteration since 2013.
Yeah.
And before that, I was working in experimental theater and then working on an experimental narrative film. So I spent like 8 years of my life just collaborating and making these sort of like theater slash weird kind of experimental puppetry things
Right.
and narrative film. So then so when I went to grad school 2010 to 2012, and then I started to shift outside of working collectively or collaboratively into just sort of focusing on myself again. And I think that was like a huge, scary shift for someone that had worked collaboratively for 8 years. And so since I've been showing with the gallery in 2014, I've sort of was thinking about how do you shift from a theater world, which is the black box theater world, where you get to hide behind a lot of masks and writing
Identities.
narrative. Yeah, like you get to hide yourself from an audience as a writer or as a director or as a performer, to a white cube where everything's so hyper focused on the artist and the artist's identity, and I just felt very like that's not me. I like to hide behind things, and I like to I'm not one of the people that likes to be like so out there. So then I started developing these installations, video installations that were a way for me to get around performing live, and I would record myself and then reproject myself into a space, which with this sculptural kind of set installations. I was hoping, the hope was that like the video would do the labor for me of the performance, because I love performing, but I think like it was something that was for me a therapeutic way of getting over speaking in public or like being on stage or whatever. And then I think I realized, I was like, oh, this just is actually really scary and gives me a lot of anxiety, so why do I even do it? So I think the video was working as the performance for me, just so I
Right.
didn't have to be there or like be this kind of body in the space. All this to say that I've just sort of been thinking about the role of the artist, um and the kind of dialogue around the artwork, which is something that I've been fascinated with, is that like objects get imbued with energy, right? They get imbued with power by being worked, right? Materials get imbued with power by getting manipulated by people, by humans, right? And that's how we like they gain meaning over time. Because I had synthesized the video and the performative things so much, and the sculpture, these sort of like video installations that were totally tied into the sculptural aspect. And I kind of, for this show, Expanding Brain, I wanted to separate them again. So I had just sculptures that are standalone sculptures and a video that's a standalone video. So that's how I got to Artist Interview, as just a narrative dialogue. Well, I wouldn't call it narrative, but it's sort of like a monologue.
For those who haven't seen the work, the video is, one could almost say, like a still frame or nearly a still image
Yeah.
with a person who is muffled and
Yeah.
whose voice is also muffled, which is being interviewed with this black hoodie, and you don't get to recognize a face. And it's an artist being interviewed, and it kind of shifts between a monologue and an interview. And somehow it also feels, because of that, it also feels having parts of a confession-like expression and others that are more confrontational towards the person who's interviewing. And I would say very much, once you stop trying to understand who the artist is, there's a lot of clues that are given through the conversation, but they sprout in different directions. But they also very much confront, what does one expect from an artist to be, or how does one expect the artist to act or respond, or what type of artwork they're expected to make according to racial features. And going through the conversation goes through both identity and psychological aspects. And when I saw the video for the first time, I was very touched by it in different ways. It stayed into my head for quite some time, and I was very touched by how it went straight to the point. And according to how I was feeling during the day, I could either interpret the conversation as very confrontational and almost aggressive, and in other moments I could interpret it as very funny, and it would make me smile, or it would make me, develop further thoughts around the whole conversation. So I assume that because of the process that you were going through, also from the black box to the white box, they were also, because of theater and the different characters that are in there and your work with performances, there has always been a lot of work with identity and cultural aspects and kind of these different masks, but also, what are you supposed to impersonate when you're impersonating a character? What is there to expect? How can you break that expectation? Or how can you push it further?
Yeah, I think it's exactly like for this show, Expanding Brain, I was sort of thinking about, it was the first time I would make a body of work that was directly addressing my identity, my personal identity, because before that, I think I was always just keeping away from that territory, like a 10-foot pole. Like I didn't really want to touch it because I didn't really know how I related to it. And then I've realized over many years of sort of just, being an artist, or how would this intersect with my artwork, right? Like, does it intersect with my artwork? Does it have to intersect with my artwork? But this kind of pressure you feel as an artist to kind of perform, to people's expectations of, what their preconceived notions of you may be based on what you look like, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, whether you're, whatever background you're from, whatever, whatever, even like not even just like gender or race, but sexuality, or you know what I mean, like whatever that is. People have to just categorize you because it's easier that way. And so like I kind of have always resisted that, and then I feel like I'm still resisting it with this show, but at least for this body of work, I was directly addressing the resistance, whereas before I just wasn't even talking about it or consciously thinking about it. So there's just a lot of works like, like the shelf piece where it's an interview between myself and a curator that had, not an interview, but an email exchange where a curator had emailed me just to ask me what my race was. And then they didn't respond for a year. And then they like emailed me back with the same question as if they had never emailed me before. And then they finally responded, and they just like completely flaked. And like it's sad that this kind of stuff I mean, it's not the worst thing that could happen to anybody, but it was just a more evidence to me of this kind of way that people want to silo artists into their genres, right?
Yeah.
And then also like according to race. And I've also heard that, I mean, not heard, but I also understand that there's a reason for that, right? Like in the early 20th century, 60s, 70s, 80s, there were no spaces for people of color in the museum. So there was a necessity for spaces
Yes.
for people of color. And I get it, but I think there's a limitation there after a while, because then people just get pushed into that scene versus, and then there's the original, world. And I mean, like, I don't know, I money and power are very difficult things to shift.
Yes.
and I think that, like, sometimes it's also great when you have your own areas of, like, being kind of never mind, I'm gonna stop right there.
No, it's also about creating that freedom and that safety to express
Well,
of
what
expression.
I was gonna say was that, like, when you're in your own communities, you actually have more freedom of expression because you're not hyper aware of being a messenger. You know what I mean? Like, you're talking to your own community and you get it, and people get you, and then that's how great culture is formed, right? And so it's like, I mean, but then there's also amazing things when culture is synthesized. Like, for example, myself, I am a mixed race person. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't have this.
Tell me about it.
I wouldn't have this perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Of knowing what my father's experience was versus my mother's experience, and it's not so black and white. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I felt like this video was kind of a cathartic process of just kind of, like, I had written all this dialogue in my sketchbook, and it's just a lot of ramblings, things I've heard people say, conversations I've had with people, and it's tongue-in-cheek as well. It's satire. It's not meant to be, it's not like I'm clearly someone that, you know what I mean, like, it's believe it or not, is meant to be funny. It's kind of just like my dark humor, I guess. But I think that basically, I'll talk about the influence of the video. I was struck by, I watched a BBC interview of a female assassin from the Philippines, and she was they were interviewing her because they were just sort of talking about how bad the drug wars had become under Duterte, and that how they were hiring these like really poor people to go out as assassins and murder drug dealers, right? And this female, the video was I basically copied the framing and the jacket and the blurred out face of this BBC interview of this female assassin, and she's sort of talking about being in this moral bind of being in a situation where she otherwise doesn't really have much money to feed her kids, but her husband got her into this situation of assassinating drug dealers. And I was like, that was kind of like a seed of inspiration of being in a bind being in a bind in a situation where you might have moral conflicts within the world that you're working in, but it's also what's feeding you and it's what's keeping you alive. That kind of Brechtian pain of like,
because there is also these two other pieces that that I saw together with the video the first time. They're not exhibited here at Nitja, but they're also visible on the website. Yeah, these memes. That one of them is about this meme of the expanding brain. Of someone realizing they're a person of color, someone realizing they're an artist, and then ultimately someone realizing they can do whichever type of artwork they want to do, and the other piece has to do with breaking or not your economic viability.
Yeah. The just play the game, the evil Kermit. It was me just play the game, also me damage your commercial viability. I mean, this is not new. These are the things that artists know about. It's like it's like the unspoken things about the art world that no one wants to tell you in school. And then you get out there and you're like, oh, or like you're unconsciously rewarded for these things, even in school maybe, and you get out of it and you're just like, oh. There's like, and I have conversations with my friends all the time, and like all my friends are also artists and working in this industry and in the art game, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, that's actually like, I can't even wrap my brain around that. But at least like for me, my identity and my race, I can, and my role as a female artist, I can control that. Like I can control how I can be seen, or the message I want to get out there. So
yeah, or at least how you want to react to it. And I think that the video, although it has this dark humor, it's a very cathartic reaction. I mean, it is even for those looking at it in a way. Yeah, it's so straightforward.
The other thing about this piece was that I feel like it also has these aspects of the kind of monologue soliloquy of this film by Louis Malle, which was kind of influential. It's called My Dinner with Andre. And it's kind of the same thing, where it's like a conversation between two people. It's a one shot. The entire film is probably 2 hours long, but it's just these two guys at dinner, and it turns into a monologue. I kind of just wanted that space to reflect and write all this out for a character to say it, right? And that's the beauty of writing. You can kind of like say all the things you want to say, but put it in another person's mouth. So like it's a character, and you can kind of have these, like,
you're doing theater again.
Of course. Everything's theater. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, to say that an artist that's making paintings isn't theater, like, that's also a form of, of a theatrical gesture, like this mystery of the mystery of the artist is completely is theatrical, I just have the show pulled up and I'm looking at the images just so I can go back into that headspace of where I was at. And I like the works are like hyper minimal. They're super minimal to a point. Like I really just wanted to pare everything down. Like, for example, there's like this shelf, these kind of like silent shelf works that kind of blend in, like they're kind of camouflaged, but if you look closely, you'll see that there's all these text on them.
Yes.
My one favorite one is the cup shelf, and it has like the day I realized I was a minority. Oh, sorry, the day I found out I was a minority and the day I found out about my privilege. Those are these two statements that are, on this same object. And I think about that a lot because, there's something that if you're not white, there's definitely like a moment where you live your life and then all of a sudden you're kind of like, something happens, like life slaps you in the face and you're like, oh wait, I'm not like a normal human being. Like I have this like, there's this other aspect to myself that I have to know about. And like on top of being like a woman, right? And then there's like the second thing, which is like, oh, like I never felt disenfranchised. I never felt like I was someone with less rights than anybody else growing up. But then you start to like look back on things with like a different light. You're like, oh, that's why certain people treated me a certain way, or that's why. And not to say that like it has to be like this armor that we put around ourselves I don't know. I'm gonna stop there
This is
because
where
I'm
this is
gonna
where the
like,
I think this is where, like, when looking at the overall expanding brain show, all of these elements, like those that are more prominent and those that are more in hidden, like it very much reflects in a way all of the different layers of visibility and thoughts and expectations and what one projects or imagines, like, towards each other.
right.
And I think that's the beauty of it, is that once that you were confronted, you took out all of your tools, all of the psychological and work on identity and characters and expectations that you had been doing, like, nonetheless, in the earlier years of your life, and that you use them as a tools rather than closing the conversation, that you open it up.
Right.
And that's,
Yeah.
I believe, according to the amount of issues and struggles that exist at this moment in the world around all of these discourses that are, you know, global, but also so extremely peculiar to every single individual, because by the world becoming more and more globalized, we are more and more mixed in so many ways, and the story of a person is less and less understandable or visible at the first moment or at the first encounter.
Right.
So I think that it's absolutely necessary to have more works that's like yours are able to tackle this, but also more works that are able to say, you know what, like, I am not supposed to do this type of work. Like, why is that expectation of yours? I just want to do something completely else.
Yeah, I mean, this is like, and again, this isn't the first time I feel like this topic has been broached. Like, you're in school, in art school, you're kind of pressured to be like, where are you from? That's so exotic. Why don't you make artwork about that? And, like, you're kind of like, whatever that is, if you're Asian, if you're Hispanic, if you're Black, if you're Indian, you know what I mean? Like, Southeast Asian, it's like this leftover colonial, performative thing that we have to do for a white audience. And I don't really, I'm sort of not, I kind of want to stop that cycle. I think that's all part of, leftover, kind of, exotification. And so,
Yeah,
I
and
don't know. I know.
even
I
when
mean, I know that.
even when it's meant positively, very often it's still discrimination, because
Yes. Well, I
that's
mean, depending on who you talk to, like, I think that this is like, this is really controversial because, and this is why I'm like, I'm going to say this, but like at the same time, like, these are all the feelings that thoughts that I've had for a very long time. And I know other people share them, but I don't know if anybody else would actually say it. But I think that my own observations of how I've sort of come up, like in my own personal education in the art world, and like, notice these kind of weird, double standards or weird situations. Where can we acknowledge it, and then how do we, kind of move forward? Like, I like when I was talking with you the other time on our conversation,
yeah,
Skype call, like, like the whole thing about like the curator's job, and there should be a kind of like equality, right? Like, of representation at the museum, right? But it doesn't mean that we have to, like, kind of overtly, put this person or these people forward in such a manner. Like, we should just have that equality, right?
yeah.
Like, it's not like, oh, like the
It
hot new
should be a
thing.
norm. It should not
Yeah.
be the focus.
Yeah,
And
and it shouldn't be that, like, when you do that, you're pushing out all the other, like, you're basically ostracizing and alienating another group. So it's like, how do you just
yeah, it's about creating the space for everyone to express
right.
themselves, but in a way it's also about some sort of freedom of, if I want to address this, I should be given that space. If I don't want to address it, I should still be valued for whatever else I'm addressing, right?
And again, none of this is easy, right? We can have ideals of the way things should be, and artists have done this. It's not that artists haven't done it. It's not that like artists of color have always just constantly had to make work about, where they're from. There's plenty of artists that possess that personal freedom, possessed it, and made work in that manner. I'm just saying that there is a pressure in the art world that you're rewarded when you're kind of pushing those specific buttons. Not saying the subject matter isn't valid, but I'm just saying that there is a reward system in place.
Yeah.
The art world loves to be called out and punished, right? Like it wants to be like acknowledging its own downfalls or something. But I think at the same time, so then, okay, it's good to acknowledge it, but then how do you change the system, right? So you're not replicating the same habits over and over again
in a different way.
Yeah, and so I think it's like a long process, and it's really complicated, and I'm actually like, now I'm terrified of everything I've just said, because I'm just like, oh God, it's going out there again.
Yeah.
It's like, I think it's kind of funny because I'm looking at this image still of the video, and it's it's funny because this video I made of an artist interview, and now we're actually doing the artist interview.
Right.
Full
I hope a very different one than the type of the video.
Yeah, so it's like a nice like coda to the like the original piece, or something, like a revisit or something.
Right. I mean, what's definitely interesting is to try to create, at least within my work as a curator, very much unlike the emails you got. It's trying to create a conversation in which there is not. It's kind of like, say, let's have a conversation, right? But if I tell you, let's have this type of conversation, I'm already directing it. And if I'm like, okay, we should have a conversation on these struggles, but it should be held in a certain way, then I'm already like completely closing it off. So although it's as you say, like you're already scared of everything you said, it's like it's totally same on this other side of the screen and other side of the world, completely different contexts. But I think it's important to try, and it's also important to fail, and to kind of even kind of, how do you act when you fail collectively? What do you then do? What type of conversation do you open that then for? And do you also open for the ones that are uneasy and the ones that are uncomfortable? And because where will they bring you if you instead already have a preconcept of where you're supposed to go? Maybe you have no clue. In addition to working as an artist, you work with students or young adults, right?
Yeah.
Do they come to you with this type of concerns? Do you address them? How do you take it up?
Yeah. I mean, basically the same things we were just talking about. I just say the same stuff and say that it's complicated, and it only gets more complicated as you get older, as you leave school. I think right now a lot of young people are up in arms, as when you are between the ages of 18 and 21, things are very black and white, and you're very, once you build your convictions, like, which is great, people are very gung-ho about them, but you don't really see the gray areas yet when you're that age. And so I just, not to say that like I want to be a devil's advocate to them and like be like, well, what about this and what about that? Because I feel like that frustrates. I want to keep that spirit alive of, like the conviction is there, and yes, we should have, all the things you're talking about. But like, I just encourage them. Honestly, I encourage it, because better to, right? You aim for the, what is it? You shoot for the moon, shoot, you get the stars or something. Aim for the stars, you reach the moon. So like, I don't want to like, when I was growing up, I had so many people that were like, it was a different time, and it was very much, the mentality was negative. It was like, there's nothing you can do about it. System is fucking sucks. It's rigged, blah, blah, blah. And I think like, we're coming to a new age of consciousness now, where we're seeing that, you know, I think society needs to shift and grow, and you know, whether that has to do with the age of Aquarius or the, you know what I mean? But I think that, like, just to like recap the kind of things about like talking about difficult subject matter, right? I think it's easier when you know, you don't have as much to lose, so to speak. I'm like, I've got nothing to lose, I'll say it. But I also think that I mean, we just have to be honest with ourselves now. Like, I think, you know, the way things have been going aren't working, right?
They're not.
I'm hoping that with this video and this kind of bringing up of like the things we don't want to talk about, right? That's like the artist's role in society, I think, is to bring up subject matter that no one wants to talk about, and you put your finger on it to be like, no, we have to look at this again. Sorry, we're gonna stay here for an uncomfortable long period of time. Yeah, and I think that that's like that is like that to me has always been the most successful artworks that I've seen in the past, and what has inspired me to make art. So like, I think, like, you know, those are, I'm hoping to be working in that tradition,
right?
You know, if I can do it in whatever small way I can.
It's really nice because when talking, like, these subjects are so extremely close to me, and as they're difficult, and now that there is so many different emotions, like, in such a fast pace that come up, and now that you said, like, well, I've got nothing to lose, I was like, oh my gosh, I got so much to lose. But then I'm like, actually, I totally agree with you. I've got nothing to lose. I've got all, if this can make any change, you know, like, or open up for any further conversation, I've got everything else. So I've got nothing to lose.
We can't, I think, like, a lot of times, as someone that was raised in a way of like always wanting to please and always wanting to, you know, do the right thing, like I've had to unlearn a lot of those things as I've gotten older, and you just have to speak your truths, and like, we've got to move out of the old ways of doing things.
From my part, I would like to thank you very much for opening up when I was given what I consider a power or a strength in, you know, as a curator, of like who to show, who to give voices to. I think that the best reward is when I invite for a conversation, no matter if, you know, comfortable or uncomfortable one, and that on the other side there is a yes, and just let it flow and see where it goes. So I'm really, really glad that you accepted and that you have been so open with sharing.
I mean, hey, and if anything, like, I think it's opening a conversation, and hopefully it can be a seed that can inspire more thoughts about this kind of subject matter. I don't want it to kind of shut it down in any way. So it's interesting, and you know, I feel like this is all a learning process, and I am constantly learning about, you know, even like older artists that have dealt with this subject matter, and you know, it's kind of like the same problem exists. Like it's like history just repeats itself. You know, if we can study history and acknowledge, you know, how to change these patterns, this is what I'm really interested in, because it's also about like psychology, right? It's kind of like a collective psychology.
It was a pleasure. Thank you again.
Talk soon. Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.